Okay, the first one, what was the reason for the wooden train?
So, the Graceland Community Development Club originated on this campus as the Outreach International Club. The Outreach International Club, about the time that winter term went away, which was last winter term was in 2015, a transition happened to basically keep the philosophy of community development, which is the underlying philosophy of Outreach International, but to broaden its scope. So it's not just focused on one organization, Outreach International, but rather community development, local and global. That transition had been happening even when it was under the name of the Outreach International Club. The need for community development, both local and global, was in this group of students that would gather, and still did yesterday, here at 3 o'clock, then moved to 100 at 3:30, and talked about the train, to be honest with you. So I'll end there. We'll start there and I'll end there. But I believe it was fall semester of 2012 that there was a person, her name was Anna Cleland Layton, who was an active club participant that wanted the local community to have, the children in the community, to have some playground equipment. And so she began searching, what is it that we could do as a group from Graceland and with the community's involvement, what is it we could do to provide some playground equipment? So she looked into new, more expensive playground equipment and came into the reality of how expensive it was, and the fact that North Park has some of that equipment and kind of was coming to terms with it. And yet she had in her mind what would happen if there would be a wooden train, or some kind of wooden equipment instead of the new or fancier equipment. So she got to searching online. She found a set of plans, like architectural plans for a wooden train. And out of her desire that there be this playground equipment, the club looked at that and said, well, how much are the plans? Just for the paper plans, they're like, I don't know, $50 or something like that. But it was a set of plans that had for 4 cars. And so she went ahead and bolted out there and brought in the plan and bought the plans. And then as a club, we looked at them and said, we don't know that we could really afford to do 4 cars, but maybe we could do one of the cars. And so out of our own club funds. And then I believe there was also a bridge endowment fund at that time that might have made some sense. Okay, well, maybe we can do something with the bridge endowment money where Graceland has this set up. The Bridge family have given some resources that when there's an effort between Graceland and the community that kind of literally helps to connect the two. And if a group from Graceland, a club or a house from Graceland, submit a request to do a project like that, they can get some funds to help do pay for some of the materials of the project. And then at the end of after some period of time, anyone in that year that's submitted a project like that, then there's some additional funds that'll go back to the club. So the Graceland Community Development Club has been the beneficiary of that process over the years multiple times, because we know that it works. And we're also focused on trying to build community between Graceland and Lamoni. The train is iconic in that it is the bridge, a physical representation of sweat equity and labor and effort, ideas, efforts, and labors by Graceland students, and yet its location is really on city property in the city park. So with plans in front of us, club members began talking. A person surfaced. Her name was Darcy Volz, V-O-L-Z. And Darcy was in she's her junior or senior year. She's an upperclassman, very skilled carpentry skills. She went to work on, here's the plans, so we could place the order for lumber. We went to the local lumber yard, which is Southern Iowa Builders, still out there. It's still the lumber yard out by Come and Go. And we began to talk to them about the idea and told them that we didn't think we could probably afford to do more than one. And quite honestly, they stepped up and provided the lumber for a second one. So we had, as a club, we were finding the way to have the money, maybe from bridge endowment funds primarily, to purchase the wood and screws and what all it would take for that. and the lumberyard offered to do the second one. It also took us talking to the city to say, hey, city, well, if we were to do this and we had these plans, where would you want it to be? After all, it's probably going to be city property, and we go away, and we don't really know how it'll come out and what liability issues and maintenance issues, and there was some process. I remember being in front of city council representing this well-intended group of students interested in building a train, and by the time momentum kept building, about all of a sudden there were some other donors, Cindy and I were two of them, some other members of the community also were catching wind of it, willing to do some stuff and participate in whatever. So by the time that we were ready to lay out its foundation, where it would sit, there was a decision. It was going to be all four of the cars. So we didn't just end up building one up first and then one next year and the 1 year after, whatever. Nope. In fact, Kurt Shields and the folks from Lamoni, the city of Lamoni, dug out the area, put down this wooden foundation or lumber that was around it, put down rock. So it's got a foundation of sitting on a fairly solid rock foundation. And then the first thing to put in was what looks like tracks, the cross pieces. So the rails are on top of, so it looks like a real railroad track underneath it. It's made out of wood, but it looks like there's a track underneath it, railroad ties. Mm-hmm. So there's pieces that go across that look like ties, and then there's pieces that are on top of it that are like rails. So those went in, and Darcy, in fact, the lumber yard delivered lumber out there. A gentleman by the name of Bob Bjorlund, friend of mine, used to work at Graceland, lives in the community, took an interest as well. He also admired Darcy's energy skills and ability, and they spent probably the most hours, the two of them. I spent quite a few hours out there, but other Graceland students did too. We're following plans. Darcy and Bob were cutting things, and you'll notice that all pieces were screwed together. It required round wheels, like train wheels. There's a gentleman in town by the name of Carl McGuire that has a certain saw that was willing to use his band saw to cut those wheels out by the right sizes. We had specs, we had the lumber, but we didn't have necessarily the right tools to do that. He did. He cut the wheels out. It would be in that spring semester, probably March or so of that year, that the construction all happened. One of the tragedies that had happened was so one of the things that also happened in the midst of this, a little bit of the tragedy of the story of the train, is about the time this is coming into effect on October 31st, in the year prior to the train being completed. It was like the business teacher in the high school. Her name was Sharon Carr. She died suddenly. Unexpected death, passed on in her home. She was 49 years old. And her sons, Tim, Alex, and Jackson, were my son's ages, from Lamoni, and Alex was at Graceland and was on Orion House. Ethan, my middle son, was an HP of Orion House. There was a strength around Orion. They wanted to do something to help kind of memorialize or in honor of Sharon, and they were wrestling with what that would be. Others of us were at the same time recognizing the role of this train being in the middle of the community, and that Sharon and Brad, her husband, had raised their family here in Lamoni. And so you'll see on the plaque on the side of that train that it became dedicated to Sharon Carr. There's a nice short little write-up about her commitment to family values and being the mom of Tim, Alex, and Jackson. So there also then ends up being Orion House and some names of some of the HPs of Orion House that were also either must have put some funds into how we end up paying for the whole train. And with Brad's approval, by the way, Brad and the boys approved of our choice to honor, recognize Sharon for that, or with the train's existence. So that's kind of, it took everyone's involvement and support. The club, individuals in that club that got all jazzed about it, the city and its participation. Since that time, There have been various things that the club has continued to do with the train. Maintain it. We've been down and done some additional things to the train almost every year, whether it's resealing it, eventually painting it, putting in brown wooden chips of rubber in where the rocks were. I told you there was a rock foundation. Well, now you go down there and you go, oh, there's like these pieces of rubber under there, which are a little softer cushion if a kid's knee comes off or whatever. And one year, with, again, another bridge endowment project, we raised the wood that's around the outside. We put another higher piece of wood all the way around. So we could put more of those rubber pieces in there and thicken that up a little bit. And probably the thing that's been a reminder to people every year is at the holidays, we light the train. And yesterday afternoon, as the Graceland Community Development Club met first in here to make plans and then in there to set plans, there's an email that came out from Natalie Harper earlier today. It says next Tuesday afternoon at 3:30, we are going to go light the train. And so at one point, one of the additions that we did was we purchased lights. And at first, the first year we did it was just like cheap, whatever little lights that went on it. And we got them on there and they worked. I mean, it was cool. The train was lit. A year or two later, we got figured out, let's buy rope lights, a really long, solid rope light. And so that's what we have, is sets of rope lights to where you can put these lights on each of the wheels and along the bottom so that it gives an appearance that it doesn't necessarily look like it's running down the track. But on the other hand, we also have found the way that smokestack, we can extend it with a wire and use these white lights up there and then run the white lights back off from that so it gives an appearance of like there's smoke coming out the chimney and it's going back along the top of the train, whereas the bottom of the train, the wheels are lit. And the city has long had a history of lighting a Christmas tree. The tree is right beside the train. So right now you don't see it. There's an evergreen tree there. Well, the city will end up putting lights on that for the holidays. And it's kind of an interesting outcome that you've got a train that's under the tree, so to speak. And it's its own thing. The kids in the community love the train. One time in the summer, I was going by the train, and there's a whole bunch of kids on it. They're from North Park. They're from Funshine. Funshine has some nice playground equipment. And there's some really nice, decent, new playground equipment right beside Funshine in North Park. And the two people that were with that, I'd say dozen kids, and the kids were just crawling all over the train at the time, right? I said, so why do you guys come down here? They say, the kids love the train. If we give them the option to choose what to do, where to go to play on the playground, they will always choose to walk the distance from Funshine to the city park to play on the train when there's some really nice other fun playground equipment right outside their back door. But the train captures their imaginations and they can crawl in it, over it, and it's just, I don't know, it's an interesting thing. And it happens to be right on the old railroad track. I mean, City Hall is the old depot. There's a couple of trees. One of the things we did one year is the reality is it needs some shade on it in the summertime. It's kind of out there a little bit. And so one year we planted 2 maple trees, and they're doing well. But to dig those holes to put those maple trees in, we were digging down into the old railroad bed from years ago. And so it's not nice, easy digging with, nice black dirt or whatever. There's like the rock that would have been the foundation underneath of the old railroad bed that one of those trees is planted in. And I can tell just by looking at the 2 trees, those trees were the same size when they were planted. One of them is planted in healthier soil, easier to grow in. The tree probably is healthier and taller and bigger. And the other one isn't growing as quickly. It's doing fine, but it's not as robust of a tree. And I'm sure that's very much a function that it's not in ideal soil. It's planted in a train bed, but it's also doing what it ought to do in terms of starting to get big, and those trees are getting big enough that they're casting some shade in the summertime. And they don't have the train completely shaded yet, But in due time, those maple trees will definitely shade the tree.
Did you say how long the project was?
I would say our planning was in December-ish, and completion of construction, I'm sure, was probably in April. And graduation was in May, I'm sure.
So about like 6-ish months?
Yeah, from original looking at some, Anna, Cleveland Layton finding and pulling and buying these plans until the time that the train was in place was probably a 6-month period. But it took the unique set of skills that we had, both in the students. Anna, it was very much had a passion about there being a playground equipment. Darcy very much had the carpentry skills and interest and dedicated the time to do it. You can imagine all of the pieces of wood that had to be cut. And she, I think, worked well with the community, and the club worked well with the city of Lamoni, and the club worked well with the building center, the owners of the lumberyard, and so that on the one hand they contributed enough wood to do one of the train cars. They also cut the majority of the pieces, which was really helpful, to in that way not. Not every piece had to be cut on site, although Darcy and Bob, sometimes me, but mostly them, also did that. And if you go out, there's screws, everything is screwed together, it's not nailed together. And some of the projects have been, at times we've gone through, tightened all the screws. Other times we've added more screws. We've reinforced the wheels. One of my concerns from the beginning was that the wheels seem vulnerable to me. They appear to me to be the most vulnerable piece. If there were those who were wanting to be destructive toward the train, the wheels are the most vulnerable, and then I think the chimney is the second most vulnerable because, just by the nature of its size and it could easily be abused and get knocked off. Same thing with the wheels. The wheels have survived. In fact, in the first year or two, I thought I might as well start getting planned. What can I do to do replacement wheels? Because they're going to go sometime. They haven't gone yet. And that's just a function of care and there hasn't been adults or college students or even little kids that became too abusive to it. They play hard on it. There's no doubt about that. I have driven by when there's a kid standing on the top of the chimney, or standing certainly on top of the engine cap. Very much standing on the very top of things. And I've got to give the city credit for kind of going with the potential risk of having something that somebody could fall off from and get hurt. Our efforts to put that additional cushion down there and to widen it and the city's good sense to keep some grass all the way around it probably adds to the fact that it has survived the risk management evaluation of people. There'd be others that would not have taken the risk. There have been others that would have gone, college students go out here and build a train on our property. What are you talking about? But it took enough community members. Bob Bjorlund would be in a skill level, a carpentry skill level that's probably advanced. He was a skilled carpenter as an occupation, and so in some ways, the person you met with, Bill McElroy. Bill's actually a little bit older than Bob, but Bob's reputation of being a good carpenter helped us shore up the confidence of the city that Bob would have oversight.
Basically, the last one is, what are some stories having to do with the train, if you can think of any?
Let me think what else is really stories about the train. It would have to relate to the kids and families' use of it, just that it's highly used at all times of year. There'll be times in the midst of winter, there's snow everywhere, and the kids are playing on the train. Or in the summer, the school's out, and where are our kids at? Or that whole North Park visit, or the Funshine Little Kids visit. When you go down to visit the train, encourage everyone to kind of look at the plaque and contemplate names and implications of it's also its own interesting memorial, not overblown, but there's this little plaque up there that says, hey, Sharon Carr made a difference in this community, and there are people that wanted to memorialize her, and that's part of the train's existence. One of the things that happened one year after the train was there, you'll notice there are 2 heavy concrete benches that are close by. And I'd ask of you to visit there again sometime. If you haven't gone to those concrete benches, read the plaques that are on the concrete benches. One was dedicated by a family to a person kind of as a memorial event. The other one was put in by the Graceland Community Development Club. Part of that was to allow a place for parents or grandparents to sit while their kids are playing on the train. So it faces the train. And it's in the shade, so it's back underneath of a tree a little bit. Even as that happened that year, the students, the club at Graceland, and what was involved was we put down concrete, and that way the other families' bench that they already had there could be placed on the concrete. And then the new bench that we just got was placed on the concrete. Probably more than anything, I would ask of you to read the plaque. I was involved in writing it, but I can't quote it. It does reference a scripture from Community of Christ Doctrine and Covenants about that people laugh and play and sing, and that the well-being of children here and other places in their well-being or welfare resides our well-being and welfare. It's kind of, for me, a little more philosophical message about it's not just a piece of playground equipment in Lamoni. There's more to it, and then it acknowledges that the club has had the vision, or the club was behind the placement of that bench and wishes well to families and children locally and globally. It's more about the essence of why the train and why the involvement and a bigger picture reason than, it's just a piece of playground equipment in the local park.
So for the placement of the train, you said that City Hall chose the placement of it, or was it a collaboration?
It was a collaboration. It was a request by the club, could we put the train in the park? That exact location of where in the park, although I think we were inclined to want to put it right there, the decision of exactly where had to be the city's. And rightfully so. I remember the existing director of Kurt Shields, who's been at the city, worked for the city for a long time, reports to the city manager. So really between Kurt Shields and the city manager, who's Barb Stuck, and Barb was in that role at that time. So Barb and Kurt, were nodding yes to this, and then the city council had to approved it, nodding yes to it as well. But I remember maybe with Kurt going out and staking out the location and then allowing people to think and look at that for a while. And then at a certain point, Kurt pulled in there with a backhoe and dug the hole and brought the rock that was the basis for that. And then I remember being involved with, I'm sure that we probably purchased, there's wooden 4x4s that are treated lumber that are all the way around it, and the rock was inside of that. And now since then, what we added at one point was what I call 2x6s. They're 2 inches wide, and they stick up higher than the 4x4s just so that it captures or keeps some of that, hesitant to call it mulch because it's pieces of rubber tires. They're brown. It just keeps it inside there so it doesn't all get thrown away or kicked out or whatever. It does over time. In fact, that'll be something in our future. I'll be an advocate to the club to say, hey, let's go buy some more of this rubber stuff and put in there because it still is getting dissipated over time, worn down or, kicked out or whatever. And we'll also be an advocate for another paint job. You get up close to it right now and you'd go, yeah, it looks to me like it could use some paint again. And this time we may go through with the decision to paint interior and exterior. In our past, we've only painted, we sealed it, would pressure wash it, reseal it, and then there was a decision to go with, let's go with more of a wooden stain, a dark stain that to where and then that's been stained at least twice too. So it's not, I mean, it's his original structure, but it's, originally it was just treated lumber, and then it was treated lumber that had sealant on it 2 or 3 times, and then the sealant became like a stain that was over it. In some ways, at least from a distance, its dark color right now I think actually looks pretty good, but you get up close to it and you go, ooh, yeah, it's going to need some. It's going to need my suggestion would be next summer or next spring maybe, that it'll be time again for it to, it weathers through the winter pretty rough, winters are hard on things like that, but